Let's talk a little bit more about the legacy of Fukushima. I'm joined now live from the U.S. state of Oregon by Chris Goldfinger. He studies oceans and earthquakes at Oregon State University. Thanks so much for being with us. Chris, from a scientific perspective, what happened 5 years ago, how rare is it, and is it likely to ever happen again?
Well, the type of earthquake they had was preceded 1,000 years before by one similar. But so the Japanese records are quite good, but they weren't quite good enough to fully capture that very long-term repeat interval type of event. So we don't know how far back in time they go, but probably many millions of years. And we don't know if 1,000 years is a typical repeat time, but it might be. There are several events before that as well. So they were very, very unlucky to get a 1,000-year event.
It did a long shadow, though. I mean, let's talk a little bit about the legacy of this disaster and whether there's been an impact on the nuclear power industry. I want to put up a graphic for our viewers to take a look at. The IAEA tracks the number of nuclear reactors worldwide. North America has the most, 118 in operation, another 5 under construction. Western Europe and East Asia are close behind. Other parts of Europe and Asia are near the bottom of the list, along with Latin America and Africa. The question from a seismology perspective, are certain regions of the world more or less safe for building these nuclear plants, would you say?
Well, certainly, yeah. The Earth is made up of tectonic plates, and most of the earthquake action comes at the subduction plate boundaries, where you have one plate diving underneath another. Other boundaries, big strike-slip boundaries like California and the San Andreas Fault are also hazards. But many of the world's coastlines are passive margins, so they're at very little risk of large earthquakes or the tsunamis that come with them. So Japan, unfortunately, has 2 big subduction zones on its eastern shores and a number of nuclear power plants lined up. And so the power plants, they tend to be along the coastlines because cooling water is essentially unlimited. So they're an attractive place, seemingly attractive place to put these plants. But on top of a subduction zone is definitely a negative for that kind of location.
So given that, was this sort of a perfect storm for Japan?
Well, it was really. The conventional wisdom about northeast Japan as opposed to the Nankai, southwest Japan margin was that the maximum size of earthquake that they could expect, and what was in their more recent history, was about 8.4 or so, and national policy was predicated on that earthquake size. And they were just beginning to find some geologic evidence. Just a few people had found it that indicated that something along the magnitude 9 range had happened in the past, in the year 869. It was called the Jogan earthquake. But that point of view hadn't taken hold just yet.
Chris, after what happened in Fukushima, a lot of experts began to look at locations of nuclear reactors in relation to fault lines, some of the things you're talking about. They found a surprising number located on or near fault lines, making them prone to damage in an earthquake. Is that still a problem, or has that been remediated?
Well, that remains a problem. Part of the problem is we often don't know enough about the faults themselves, what the maximum earthquake size they can generate, what their repeat intervals are, and when the last earthquake was. So, many of the plants that were built in the 70s, for example, the geology has moved along and uncovered new evidence, and yet the plants are still there. And that was essentially what was happening in Japan as well. The geologic evidence was undergoing a lot of revision, but meanwhile the plants are there and operating. So as we learn more and more, usually the news for locations like that doesn't improve.
Chris Goldfinger joining us from the state of Oregon. Thanks so much.